Back, everyone, to the expanded virtual conference. We are excited to bring you the next session called 6 Keys to Progress in Your Company. And you're going to have an opportunity to hear from a number of our brand new certified conscious capitalism consultants in this session. We have dozens of business leaders enrolled in the program and are excited to bring you a little bit of insight into what they are doing to help move conscious capitalism principles into practice inside of their companies. And to kick us off, I'd like to welcome my fellow co-founder and co-facilitator of the Conscious Capitalism Consultant Certification Program, Nathan Havey.
All right, thank you very much, Amanda. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who is tuning into this session. Conscious capitalism is a practice. It's not a state or a certification. It is a practice. It's a discipline. So no company on earth, as far as I can tell, is unimpeachably conscious in every aspect of its operations. We all still make mistakes. We all seek to grow. We all have more blind spots that we need to uncover again and again and again. And best I can tell, there is no end state where you are completely conscious. So if conscious capitalism is a discipline, it's something that you have to have discipline to continue to improve your practices with conscious capitalism. That includes every company that's participating in the movement. It includes all of us who are on this webinar right now, and it even includes Conscious Capitalism, Inc. And so a couple of years ago, there's a journey that Conscious Capitalism, Inc. started that is reaching a very important milestone today. And I want to turn the mic back over to my co-facilitator and co-leader of this program, Amanda Catherine Roman, to share a bit of insight about what CCI has seen.
Thanks so much, Nathan. And as you said, it is an ongoing and a journey, as we often talk about, in terms of what conscious capitalism looks like for different leaders. And one of the things that we continually hear at Conscious Capitalism, and I'm sure many of you in the community here as well, that they resonate with the credo and they love the concept of conscious capitalism. And so much of what John Mackey and other leaders in the movement share about conscious capitalism, people appreciate. But they're not exactly sure what to do in terms of how to bring that alive in their company and what to do when they go back to their organization after attending an event or a conference with conscious capitalism. So our role at Conscious Capitalism, Inc. is not to certify businesses. There are some great programs out there that do that. One of the reasons we don't follow that pathway is because we don't think there's one way to do conscious capitalism or to bring conscious capitalism to life. And one of the reasons that we wanted to create the consultant certification program is that we know that people need that additional support in some cases to bring the practice to life inside of their company. And so for a number of years, we've been researching and looking at some different design options. And in December of 2018, the opportunity to connect with Nathan came up, and we reached out to one another and started talking about the different ways we were supporting business leaders around the world in this practice. And that was really the beginning of this journey of what the Conscious Capitalism program looks like now. And so we explored together some curriculum and structure ideas. And what we really solidified the partnership and the collaboration that we entered into with Nathan was the fact that we didn't want this to be a pay-to-play program. We wanted it to be something that would grant the certification only to those who show up and put in the work and have a real life client engagement, that they are helping a company to advance the practice of conscious capitalism. And so that's what we endeavored to create.
So in April of last year, as the annual conference was being torn down in the room next door, there were 17 brave candidates who decided they would like to be the guinea pigs for this new program, who stepped forward to begin this journey. Most of us were there in person. There were a few folks that needed to attend via Zoom, but we all got together for our very first session. And in the year that followed, these folks have put in between 15 and 30 hours per month of time toward this program. They have all been working very hard to understand not just the ideas around conscious capitalism, but the very specific tactical ways that companies can make progress in their discipline of conscious capitalism. And so what is about to happen is we have 6 keys of what progress takes within companies. These are from specific cases, from specific companies, but they are likely general best practice advice for anyone who seeks to advance the practice of conscious capitalism within their company. So as these 17 candidates studied around the year, we all got to know each other much better. We all learned from each other. Many of these folks are tremendously experienced consultants in their own right. So there's a very, very cool collaboration came up, and there was an opportunity to create an accelerated certification track. There were 6 candidates who were ready to go for the accelerated track. They had a client consulting arrangement that they had been working on for months. They believed that they could show real progress in that arrangement, and they wrote it all up into a very rigorous case study. They submitted the case studies. We put them through kind of an intense oral examination, and they had to ask their client to give them a recommendation. I'm pleased to say that all 6 of the people who sought accelerated certification satisfied all 3 requirements in the process. And about 2 weeks ago, we announced the very first 6 people to be certified conscious capitalism consultants, the first 6 in the world. And so you are now going to meet each of them, and each of them is going to share with all of us the key that their case study suggests is critical to making progress in the adoption of conscious capitalism ideas on the factory floor, so to speak. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the first certified consultant. Please meet from Portland, Maine, Tara Jenkins.
Good afternoon, everybody, or wherever you are in the world. Thanks for allowing me to share my story. I'm gonna just set it up a little bit. It's a dark night, and I'm walking with a bunch of friends down a netter lane near my house. And there's a gaggle of kids in front of me, and the moms are behind. My 9-year-old spider and my 11-year-old vampire are trailing in front, along with a dog and a horse and a jockey and a doctor. And it's 2018, and my family is really excited to be back for Halloween in our neighborhood in Scarborough, Maine, after a 3-year expat assignment in Amsterdam. And my phone starts blowing up. First message comes through, and I read it, and I call a recruiter. Second message comes through, and I say to the group of moms I'm with, I think I need to resign tomorrow. And the third message comes through all in the space of 5 minutes, and I call a colleague and say, I'm resigning tomorrow. She says, sleep on it. I slept on it. That didn't change anything. I couldn't rationalize staying any longer. The golden handcuffs were ever tightening. I'd been promoted to the first VP of HR in a $2 billion, 10,000 person company that was global, that had an unbelievably high market cap and an insatiable desire to pursue growth and profit. I walked away. And people said, but you left your bonus and your stock options for the year, and it doesn't make sense. You were on the track to be the CHRO, the next CHRO. I didn't care anymore. And other people behind my back said, I think she's lost her mind, and I think that she's really irresponsible. And I heard about that sort of through the grapevine, of course. A rumor was spread around the company that I was mentally ill. I reminded myself continuously that it was okay to leave a company. People do that all the time. My exit process felt like the extrication from a cult, and I was gaslighted. I was made to feel crazy. And for the first time in my life, and this is a really important part of my journey, I felt what it was like to be a regular employee and not HR. I've been in HR for 25 years. And never until that moment really felt what real retaliation and powerlessness feels like. And it sucked, as you can imagine. I was the primary breadwinner in my family, so it was not okay to have no idea what I was doing. I did what logically made sense. I started to apply for a whole bunch of jobs, and I experienced the horrendous, inhumane process that HR has built for recruiting. And I got further infuriated. I also interviewed for the next job that made sense on my resume, more stock, right title, more bonus, right pay, and everything seemed the same issues, same insatiable desire for growth, just a different company name. I got what you'd call the perfect job, and I felt physically sick to my stomach. And so at that point, I realized that I could not get back on the track. My actual body was signing to me that I couldn't. And in my 20 plus years of working in HR and working in organizations, I'd always operated out of my head, out of logic. I was very well trained to do that. And that was not working at all in this circumstance. So I learned that I was going to have to go with my heart and my gut. And so I learned to rely solely on instinct. My instinct was to meet as many people as possible and to reach out and figure out how I could broaden my world. And so in each person that I met and each new thing I learned, I looked at it as a breadcrumb and a trail to a place where I didn't quite know where I was going at all, but trusting that it was going to lead me to the right thing. And so I began to really get inspired by people that were building the life that they wanted, just proactively. It kind of didn't occur to me to do that, which was kind of scary at the time. And then really stopped beating myself up about being irresponsible about leaving my job and not knowing what to do next. I began to see there was a wisdom in doing that and giving myself the time and the space and really the learning experience. And so that really opened up a new way of thinking about this so-called sabbatical that I was on, or this journey that I was on. Lots of people told me on this journey that I should consult. And my reaction all the time was, yuck, I hate consultants. They waste your time. They charge you too much money. They never know what the real issue is. They don't try to solve the real issue. They give you cookie cutter solutions. I cannot be a consultant. So that was sort of my standard answer. Fast forward, it's a sunny day in March 2019, and I'm on a walk with a new friend, and I'm talking to her about how I feel about people and organizations. And she says to me, "It sounds like you're a conscious capitalist." I said, "What the hell is that?" And she gave me an overview, and I said, "Oh, I better go figure this out." And when I put my kids to bed that night, I did all the research, and the credo comes up, and I get goosebumps. And I see there's a conference in a few weeks, and I see there's this brand new certification program. And I go into my husband and I say, "I think I have to go to this conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I have to enroll in this new certification program. And by the way, it's going to be $7,000. Which of course I'm unemployed and have no idea what I'm going to do. So I have no business logically spending $7,000 on anything." He says very graciously, and some of my cohort might remember this when we first met, when Nathan was talking about in April, "I'll sell the Ducati." And the Ducati, if you don't know, is a beautiful motorcycle. I don't even like motorcycles at all, and I can recognize it's beautiful. So that's kind of a big deal to say that. And so I'm kind of off and running. I have an epiphany over the course of time that I don't have to be the same type of bad consultant that I've experienced in the past. I could do it a different way. I register my company, I open up Conscious Revolution, the company that I now have, and I go on the journey to discover my higher purpose, the higher purpose of my company, which is to inspire life through work. And then a few months later, I'm sitting at a big cafe window in downtown Portland, Maine, with two C-suite leaders who are on the journey to becoming a conscious company. They end up being my case study for the certification, and they become a client. And after the soul-sucking experience of working in a giant corporation, they're venturing out on their own as well. And we're talking about putting the foundations in place for their business. They want to build a conscious company. I have tons of organizational development experience, as well as a building expertise in conscious capitalism. We all know there's a different way to build a company, and we decide we want to try to do it together. And so we're kind of off and running once they accept my proposal. The first order of business is to figure out what's the priorities. When you're starting a new company, there's a bazillion different priorities. And within the people and conscious capitalism space, we had to figure out, where do we get started? And we thought we knew, myself having the experience that I had and them knowing how to, that they launched their business, we thought we knew. But when I sat down with the employees, a different picture emerged altogether. My pay isn't right. My work isn't challenging. I don't feel appreciated. What I do is never enough. I don't see an end in sight. I don't know why all this effort is being made on my behalf. What's going to come of it? whoa, we definitely didn't understand what was really going on. And so the employee experience was really consistent, what I heard from them. And so it made my recommendations easier to come up with, but they weren't typical consultant recommendations. These were really progressive, designed to immediately start building a conscious company. Now, fast forward, I'm presenting to the management team of the startup and explaining what I learned and my bold recommendations. I'm providing difficult feedback to the CEO about the employee's experience working with him. I'm providing newly highly conscious policies and practices that are really atypical in their organization. And I'm recommending that they overall increase the pay of the team by over $30,000 annually. Huge stuff. I expected pushback. I had to muster up my courage to go in there and, again, follow my instinct to be like, I know these are the right things to recommend, but I don't think they're going to like what I have to say completely. And so I said, as a conscious leader and as a conscious consultant, I'm going to be authentic no matter what I think the costs might be. They accepted all the recommendations. I was really surprised. They were way more conscious than I even thought. The pay for the team went up. We built a guide to their ways of working. A new hire was approved to lighten the load. We launched the process to discover their higher purpose. And most importantly, the CEO really took the feedback to heart. A few months later, after working together, the CEO evolved his leadership so that the team felt really appreciated. Many conscious policies and practices were in place. They built a conscious hiring process where they found a new fantastic team member who, when she had a conviction on her record, they didn't even blink. And we got close to the end of the higher purpose process, and then COVID hit. So we'll pick that up again when the timing is right, but we had really great momentum. And a huge thank you to my client for inviting me on the journey for their conscious business to build it. I'm so proud of the work we've done together. Their genuine dedication to conscious capitalism resulted in exceeding every goal they set out for themselves in their first 11 months of existence. And for anyone who's started a business, you know how hard it is to start a business and then actually exceed your goals. Is amazing. They have an amazing story, and I'm so excited to be a part of it and also continue to work with them. And a key reminder for me, and I think a call to action for all of us, is that when we think we know, when we really think we understand the situation, there's always more to the story. And all it takes is asking. And when you ask, you'll learn something new. And I think back to the perspective of when I was in HR and I thought I knew what it was like to be an employee, and I didn't. And my client thought they knew what was really going on in the organization, and they had more to learn as well. And I think when we're really curious about asking and understanding others' perspectives in the fuller story, then it's one of the best ways that we can evolve on our conscious leadership journey. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Tara. Again, it's Tara Jenkins from Portland, Maine, and Tara has given us a great nugget there about just getting in conversation with your stakeholders and asking what their experience is. That's a fantastic place to start for anyone seeking to make progress in conscious capitalism, but it's only a start. In order to actually make the progress, you have to keep going. And for more on that, please meet our second consultant. This is Bob Scoville from Boston, Massachusetts.
So I was sitting in a pew in the dark chapel at St. John's Prep, crying uncontrollably on a Friday morning in April 2016. My friend John Carnevale had died suddenly and unexpectedly at the age of 52. John was larger than life. He was the founder and CEO of a growing financial services firm, and he was the first and most vocal member of the CEO peer group that I'd been leading for 12 years. As I listened to his service, a line from a poem needled me. I'll never reach my destination if I never try. A few days later, sitting in my office, I found myself looking at the leaflet from John's funeral. I'd been successfully coaching CEOs for many years, but sometimes an emphasis on financial results felt empty. I'd been learning about conscious capitalism and was drawn to the 4 tenets. I'd actually just returned from my first conscious capitalism conference. I wanted to get in the game and work with companies to help them make the changes I was learning about, especially leadership beyond the CEO. So as I sat there at my desk, I wrote a short note to John that I still have today. What I wrote to him was, I'm going to be bolder. I'm going to push myself and the people that I work with to be their best. And so that moment of loss and reflection set me forth on the path that I'm still on today. By September, I had moved on from my position as Vistage chair. Shortly after that, I was helping to co-found the Conscious Capitalism chapter in Boston. I became the president of the chapter this past fall. I began conducting custom leadership development programs, but it wasn't enough. And then around the holidays in 2018, I met one of my old Vistage members, Eric Piazzio, for lunch at Wahlburgers in Linfield to connect and catch up. Eric listened as I talked about my enthusiasm for conscious capitalism. He asked me some questions. He'd been disappointed in the results of a survey that indicated his employees were barely engaged. His manufacturing business, American Surgical Company, made tiny sponges used in neurosurgery. He believed his company was doing good work in the world, and he wanted his workers, many of whom worked over sewing machines in a clean room, to see their work as more than a paycheck. Before we left, he casually said to me, "Do you think you could help us apply conscious capitalism at ASC?" I wasn't expecting this. I walked back to my car, pinching myself. Could I actually get paid to do this? So I put together a proposal, which we discussed early in 2019. And then there I was at their conference room in March, looking out at Eric and 7 members of his team and beyond them through the window to the beautiful harbor in Salem, Massachusetts. Conscious capitalism was completely new to the team. We talked about higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, conscious cultures, and caring leadership. Some were skeptical, but we got some momentum building a list of the things that they wanted to work on. Our plan was to meet monthly, so we started defining their purpose and values in April. The team was energized. We continued to make steady progress, focusing primarily on purpose and culture through August when we conducted the engagement survey again. When they got back the results, Eric couldn't believe it. Almost all of the measures had increased, 8 by more than 30%. But despite the improvement, there were still concerns. Some of the progress hadn't really hit home with the manufacturing group. Their scores were lower than everyone else's. The group resolved to work on this. And then the train went off the track. Action items began to fall through the cracks. The business was growing and they were struggling to keep focus on the initiatives. Some felt the initiatives were more Eric's than their own. We'd been making good progress and I thought everyone was on board. So I was astonished at our next meeting when someone asked, "What are we doing all this for?" They had such a bottom line results orientation and had been pushing so hard. They lost sight of the value of all their work on relationships and it seemed distracting. Moments later, it was like a punch in the gut when someone else said, "Can a business really be conscious?" Wasn't that what we were doing, I thought? I questioned myself again. Am I really meant to do this? After the meeting, I walked to my car thinking, was that the last meeting? But I knew there was still important work to do. I called Eric and was relieved that he and the team were still on board. At our next meeting with the group, we made some changes to our approach and to the leadership of the work. And then the train got back on track. It wasn't perfect, and some still had doubts, but we kept on meeting and making progress. And then in February, the group got a surprise. In a company meeting, 3 women from the manufacturing team had taken turns standing up unsolicited and spoken from their heart. One of them, Idalma, had said, "Our work in manufacturing is hard, really hard. But the fact that management recognizes that makes it easier to keep working hard." And so after a year of this work and significant progress, there is still so much to do. And as we look ahead, we need to remember this lesson. This is a long game. It's going to be messy. Part of what we're doing is changing mindsets about what business can be. It takes time. And so the key is a regular routine. Consistent meetings create a sustainable rhythm that allows for changes externally in the business and internally in people's heads and hearts. You need to be patient. But if you keep up the drumbeat of the work, it allows for people to adjust, and you'll make powerful progress at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And the importance of a consistent cadence, the rhythm that Bob is talking about, is our second key, and it's a critical one. But it still is, it leaves a business exposed to the risk of having the leaders of the conscious capitalism work decide that they're going to go somewhere else, or they're going to leave the business for whatever reason. So the only way to survive that challenge, or the best way to survive it, is the topic of our next key and our next storyteller. Please welcome from San Francisco, California, this is Chris Schaefer.
Hi. Well, everyone starts with the story of, how did conscious capitalism come to you? And I was on a site visit at the Barry Waymiller plant in Phillips, Wisconsin 2 years ago with Amanda and Alexander and Bob Chapman, who directed a question to me, and he said, "So, what's your story, young lady?" And I said to Bob, "I've already flunked retirement twice." And he said, "Well, you retire if you've had just a job, but you don't quit if you have a calling." And now I had to figure out, what was that calling? So as the CEO of Chris Schaefer and Associates, I was that consultant for over 30 years that Tara hated, because I was doing corporate work for Fortune 100s or to startups. Typically, the mission of the work I did was to shift the company's culture, either from, well, heavens, in one case, instead of fighting competition, to actually serving their customer. And so I had to show up at individual franchises to work with the president. Now you have to realize that this company's motto was, "We run on a few good men." And my name is Chris Schaefer. And so when Chris would show up for her first in-person meeting, they were not expecting a woman. All I got was about 20 minutes of shocked silence to prove my point, and then we would work together. So I worked with over 50, 60 different presidents. I certainly was a global war warrior. But in all that time of building culture, I thought I was done. Until I got a phone call a year and a half ago from a CEO who in essence really did have a life and death situation. Now, a lot of times that could be an exaggeration. It was life and death for him. He was looking forward to a kidney transplant, and he was also trying to sell his company. So the question is really now, what is he going to do? And what I could see is that the company had a terrific reputation with its customers. However, it did not have any employee-centered culture. And as a matter of fact, if it were founder dependent or dependent upon this very small group of employees, he would have no value in the company whatsoever. So what we did is to build systems where all employees could thrive. So first thing we did, we created a process where no one was indispensable. Actually, the first test is when the chief operating officer went on paternity leave for 6 weeks. And we were able to delegate all of those responsibilities to all the other employees who actually did a great job. They stepped up, they learned more broadly about the business and how it all fit together. And as a matter of fact, they learned how they made a contribution to the rest of the business. All right, so now moving on, they had very little budget, but they still had some big needs. And so what we developed was one system in which we were doing the ultimate employee engagement trifecta. How to build willingness, how to build ability, and how to generate support for all of that in the company. So we were all ready to roll out this performance planning and review process, and the COO resigned suddenly. So now who's going to lead this? So without any training and without any experience as a manager at all, the director of sales stepped in. Now all he could do is to follow the process that we had laid out in the steps to produce, in essence, something the company had never seen before. He did a beautiful job. He wrote a performance review that was motivating, it was objective, it was forward-looking, and it was filled with the employees' suggestions and his full engagement. It was stunning. It was a gorgeous piece of work. So if you can imagine, here's somebody who had never done this before, how much he grew in confidence in his leadership skills, and how the company's culture was shifting so that employees' ideas were being asked for. All right, well, that was February. When the CEO then, all of a sudden, he got the phone call. He shows up within 2 hours to the operating room. He did get the kidney transplant. There still is no COO. The VP is the one person now running the organization. And I guess really she has in mind to make the best of this crisis. The business did slow down. However, they are able to keep every employee employed and employed at full salary, because the thing that they're doing, in addition to shipping product, is that employees themselves are looking into every system in the business, and they're finding opportunities to make it work better or save money, whatever it is. They are truly transforming the company themselves. So now, that now leads me to answer the question that Bob Chapman asked, which is, I guess, I'm coming back out of retirement. I'm thrilled to share all of the experience, all of the knowledge that I've learned while I've been in this year-long process, that I really do want to work with all of you to help transform companies, consultants and leaders into conscious capitalism. So I think my primary key is that while leaders can inspire and take on all four of those pillars, what really is true is that systems endure. And that I guess that's my mission, is to help conscious organizations develop the systems where we no longer have events, we have a way of living our business. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And so that's another great key. So we've talked about starting by asking the people that you are working with and leading for what their perspective is on your leadership. We've talked about the long-term nature of these engagements, and Chris has talked about the importance of making sure that this work actually gets baked into systems if it is to survive over the long term. So while there's tremendous emphasis in the long-term part of this and how hard the work is, we should not underestimate how quickly it can happen, especially at the hands of an adept facilitator. So our next consultant joining us with offices in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Phoenix, Arizona, and joining us today from Boquete, Panama. That may or may not be a Zoom background behind him. That's about what his front porch looks like. This is Ed Quinn.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it. And to all my colleagues, it sounds like your case studies were at a crisis. So that's what my case study is going to be about today. I got a call from a CEO back in the late third quarter, fast growth company, mid-market firm, record year-over-year sales for 5 years, but he had a problem. His leadership team was coming apart. There was little or no trust. What was worse was their conflict had infected the next levels down. The departments had very poor cross-functional teamwork and communication. There were silos, turf wars, there was fear. And the internal breakdowns were costing them financially because it was affecting their customers. The CEO said there was a critical need to revamp the service delivery models, but they hadn't done it yet. They really didn't have the trust to do it, to do the hard, continuous improvement work. The result was, with his crisis, says the customers were bailing, too many of them. The firm was losing their top line sales revenue. Hard cash was blowing out the back door. The senior team could agree on that one, though. Their account retention rate was completely unacceptable. So I could feel his urgency through the phone line. He says, look, we got to change. I have 300 employees. I got 1,200 family members. They're counting on us to fix this, to get this right. So I asked him if I could have 3 days, get all the right leaders in an offsite retreat room. And before they enter that room, give them all 360 feedbacks and some time with an executive coach to learn how other people saw them when they were at their very best and when they were in their egos behaving badly. He liked that because he said they all think the other guy's the problem. I told him his retreat would be intense, it would be fun, but there'd be no place to hide for any dysfunction in the room. And I told him if, this is a big if, his team members wanted to change, I believe he'd have a turnaround. He said, look, they're all good people. I don't want to lose any of them. Let's roll. So my name is Ed Quinn, as Nathan shared. I'm the founder and CEO of the Innerwork Company for 3 decades now. My team and I have spent a lot of time in leadership retreats like this, helping leaders and teams work on conscious business change, team change, and also paradoxically, personal change, change from the inside out. This last one is the key, personal change. Doing your own inner work, we have found is crucially important to team and organizational performance because, after all, people are the corporation. So there we were on day one, sitting in a circle of 17 chairs. They were nervous. They were still raw from some tough 360 feedback, but they knew where they were supposed to be there, right where they belonged. They were shoulder to shoulder with their colleagues, and it was time to create a different future. So after some warm-ups, we brought the full truth into the room. Their unvarnished core personal team and business issues. Using that as the backdrop, we creatively engaged them on how to build more honesty, accountability, support, empathy, trust in their team. For these guys, we also worked on the power of forgiveness to free them from their past. And we also kept challenging to keep shaping and capturing on the flip charts their new team agreements. How did we want to work together with each other going forward? By the end of the first night, many of them experienced directly they had a power, incredible power, when they were united as a team. So on day 2, we were ready to go into some really deep levels of the self. We explored effective leadership attributes and also a limiting self-defeating part of the self we call the human ego. For them, we had masked the ego and all its specific toxic patterns they had fallen into as a team. And for them, this awareness was curative. They saw some deep root causes of their breakdowns and how it affected department teams and also how it hurt their customers and their profitability. Before we wrapped, I had them sit in small circles with exercise partners with whom they had had some open workplace conflict with. And their assignment was to give each other honest, positive feedback and honest coaching feedback. They were ready for it by that time and they were engaged. Caring and empathy and even love was manifested in that room as they formed deeper bonds, owned their part to play, forgave each other, and they laid down the swords. The CEO witnessed the healing, and there were tears in his eyes and hope. they were finally, his team was getting this right. On the last day, they were seriously fired up to tackle their core business challenges. Breakout teams for improving customer service, account retention were formed, and because of the new trust levels and camaraderie, there were no sacred cows or turf issues this time. The mindset was, what are the right ways to serve our customers and align our teams to succeed? Small teams came back to full group and they blew each other away with the solutions. They found a lot of common ground and some concrete actions they could merge to drive real change the following week. So what was the postscript on this? To this day, before COVID-19, they have sustained high levels of trust and teamwork. They've driven out fear, they've improved cross-functional teamwork, and in their process of radically retooling how they serve their customers and retaining them for a long time. The CEO was a man of faith, said to me, we got our miracle. I said, well, you guys earned it. So let me leave you with this, folks in the audience. If you are a leader and you are wondering if you and your leadership team can consciously change at the self, team, and business level and begin a journey into conscious capitalism, trust that you and your colleagues, no matter how great the obstacles, can overcome them. Trust that your people are hardwired to elevate in all these dimensions of change. I like that CEO. Have faith and seize it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ed. And I think that Ed's key of really starting with the self, really starting there, that's the root of everything else is very important for us to keep in mind. Because really it is about that. It is about each of us as individuals trying to get as clear as we can about what it is that we want for the world, and then finding the effective ways to get others aligned in the pursuit of those visions. And with a great example of what this can look like, please welcome our fifth consultant. This is Ravi Rai from Epsom, Surrey in the UK. That's just outside of London. Welcome, Ravi.
Thanks, Nathan. Okay, I'm going to, for my little bit, I'm going to hide behind a couple of slides, but I promise these are not text heavy. I'm going to kind of start off also with a story. It's a story about a 10-year-old boy. It's 6 o'clock a.m. on a Saturday morning, and off he goes with his dad to clean some carpets. And like any other Saturday, they walk into a flashy office tower in the city. And he finds himself on the top floor, all on his own, bucket in hand to find water for the machine. Now it's the weekend, so everything is closed. It's pretty dark, it's pretty quiet, and he's 10 years old. He's scared, and he'd wished he'd never watched Friday the 13th. But he managed to get his bucket filled, and he rushes back to his dad, and they spend 7 hours vacuuming, cleaning, and piling carpets together. They get back home at 4 o'clock, tired from a hard day's work. The kid has dinner, has a slice of cake, and proudly takes his £5 pay for a hard day's work. And at that moment, in the corner of his eye, he sees a piece of paper with a figure of £1,300 for carpet cleaning services. And he gets super excited. And he runs to his dad and says, "Dad, wow, did we make £1,300 today?" And his dad shows him another piece of paper for a bill of £260 and explains to him what it means to be a subcontractor. That kid's sad. He and his dad worked really hard. It was their machines, their materials, their sweat, yet they got 20% of the takings. And that night he cried himself to sleep. That's just not fair. The next morning, he gets up, goes to the wholesalers to get stock for the grocery store that his mum runs. Spends a couple of hours piling up the store shelves for a few cents profit on each item. And he's stacking up dog food cans, and he looks up and he sees a landlord drive past in his Rolls Royce. How unfair, he thought. I want to be the guy with the Rolls Royce. That boy was me, and my first experiences of unconscious capitalism. Now, I would love to say that I found my social purpose and spent the rest of my life pursuing it, but I didn't. I studied hard, I worked hard, I got a scholarship from business school, and I worked at the big blue chip companies like GE and Zurich. And with my wife, we built our own business, 4 Points, and we built a nice life for our family. And we've done plenty of giving back to charities and foundations in the UK, in Turkey, and in India. But still something wasn't sitting right for me. And I think what I knew was that Rolls Royce was not what I was looking for. What was getting clearer to me was happiness was achieved by being of service to others. And I'd seen that with my parents give so much in their 50 years to the community and the church. And this really came to the forefront after I read Conscious Capitalism early last year. The book spoke to me. Now, what it did, it showed me I did have an inherent pro-social bias through how I ran the business and the pro bono work we did for charities, but I didn't have a name for it. It just felt right. But what the book also helped me realize was that what I've been doing was not higher purpose. What I was doing was giving back, doing good, corporate social responsibility, but it was not higher purpose. And higher purpose is much more, so much more. It's about the business being the engine that addresses the problems in society. Now, in parallel to reading Conscious Capitalism and other books on ethical business, I was searching for who to help next. So my next stage of doing good. And Google, bless its socks, led me to Emmaus. Now, Emmaus is a charity and became my first engagement. It's a federation made up of 30 different charities with the sole purpose to end homelessness. However, what was different about this organization, their ambition was to be self-sustaining. So different from my peers or my colleagues, where they had businesses that wanted to be better, I had a higher purpose organization that wanted to be more like a business. So reading Conscious Capitalism, coming across Emmaus, it was almost serendipitous that I came across Emmaus, and it felt right. You know, so what I did, I called the CEO. I said, hey, I hear what you want to do. And in that call, I found him to be an incredibly passionate guy with high integrity and extremely humble. So I went along and met him. And what he said to me in that first meeting was super clear. He said, Ravi, I need a 5-year strategy. I said, fine, strategy is what I do. But in that first meeting, that's when I realized the place I was going to have the biggest impact. It's when I asked him, who's going to be influenced or who's impacted by this strategy? And through that dialogue, we came up with 9 different groups. But what we also realized, there were only 2 of those groups that they were actively engaged with. So stakeholder orientation was going to be the key to unlocking a successful strategy for them. In addition, whilst they were a federation on paper, had these amazing values of respect, solidarity, openness, sharing, and welcoming, that didn't translate into the day-to-day behaviors that I saw through my assignment. I saw behaviors where directors were purely focused on their own business. They didn't share with the wider federation. In fact, some of them even questioned the need for a federation. So what I did was design an approach to strategy with a heavy, heavy focus on inclusion, relevant inclusion, so that we debated and we committed to the future priorities together. Now, we did come through after a number of months with a 5-year plan. It got signed off by every stakeholder group. They were super happy with their level of involvement. And it sounds too perfect, right? And yeah, it wasn't that perfect. It wasn't as smooth sailing as it sounds. Even after working through defining what their values truly mean in terms of behaviors, holding up the mirror to them on their behaviors, and sharing with them what a federation really means, I still saw imperfect behaviors. Okay? People weren't participating or even attending sessions around strategy. Objections to decisions that had previously been made. Clearly, egos were still at play. It was either my way or the highway, and that behavior still showed itself through. So what were the lessons that I learned in this already highly purposeful organization with an incredibly aligned leader who wants to do the right thing for his people? So what I learned was bloody hard to keep everyone together. Stakeholder management is really, really tough. It takes patience. People need to trip over the truth. You can't tell them what needs to be done. It's iterative. You've got to keep going back, communicating, engaging, and pivoting your approach. And you can't ever over communicate. And most of all, what you need is backbone and heart. You need to have backbone to be super clear and firm on the overall mission and purpose, and then heart to get alignment in a humane way. And that was my assignment. Now, to close off, I want to circle back to that 4-year-old boy's dad. And there we are in the late 70s. My dad's story is one that he came to the UK in 1963 with $30 in his pocket. He moved to an extremely right-wing part of London facing regular prejudice and racism. But he had a big heart. He dedicated his life to fairness, justice, and community collaboration. So much so that exactly 50 years later, as karma would have it, he was voted in as the mayor for his town. So the other big lesson that I've learned, goodness circles back in all aspects of life. Karma wins the day. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Ravi. And Ravi talked a lot about higher purpose. And that is something that, as we know with conscious capitalism, is critically important for us to understand well. And like the other pillars of conscious capitalism, higher purpose isn't something that you articulate once and it's done. And for more on that, our final consultant, please welcome Tim Kelly from Berkeley, California.
Thanks a lot, Nathan. My case study started about 18 years ago, at least the origins of it, when my dad sent me an email suggesting there was this woman in North Carolina I needed to meet and learn about her work, which doesn't sound that remarkable unless you know my dad, who sends me 1 or 2 emails per year and never gives me advice. So I was intrigued. Turned out that this woman had created something called the collaborative operating system, which is a self-organizing way of bringing stakeholders together around a problem or a situation or a decision, and then doing large-scale, rapid, unanimous decision-making to create a win-win solution. So I was intrigued. Now you have to understand, at this time, I was a commanding officer in the US Navy and was very happy with hierarchy. And I hadn't only been a commanding officer, I'd worked my way up from swab and deck. So it wasn't just that it was good to be king. I'd done the whole thing, everything in between. And my perspective was that people who were complaining about hierarchy weren't using it properly. But when I flew to North Carolina and met this woman and her colleagues and took upon myself to learn this system, I realized this was a full-blown replacement. At that time, I didn't know anything about self-organizing systems. Years later, I ran across holacracy, and at my wife's insistence, flew to Pennsylvania and spent 3 weeks taking all of their trainings back to back and learned that system as well. I eventually found the higher purpose of Holacracy 1 and became a certified Holacracy coach, and I'm on their board in a role called Purpose Guide, which is perfect for me. So Holacracy, interestingly, is almost the exact opposite of the collaborative operating system. Instead of doing group decision-making in Holacracy, you delegate hierarchical authority, like extreme authority, to individuals, and then they make decisions by themselves, and you can't tell them how to do it once you've given them the authority, which is creates a very interesting environment. Interestingly, both systems, and in fact, every self-organizing system I'm aware of, requires a higher purpose for the organization, just like conscious capitalism does. Hierarchy is actually the only system I know of where it's optional. In all the others, it's mandatory. So I've made a living for myself finding the higher purpose of companies. Now, one of the founders of Holacracy, most people know Brian Robertson, another one not by the name of Tom Thomason, created another self-organizing system called For Purpose Enterprise. It's actually a new business entity type. And I found their higher purpose as well. And he recommended a company to me that was selling valves to the oil and gas industry in the Netherlands. And they were transitioning from a holacracy company to a for-purpose enterprise. And their estimate was that their purpose wasn't really giving them enough. There wasn't enough meat in their purpose. It wasn't creating enough inspiration. I'm going to go ahead and share that purpose with you so you can see it here. I just have a couple slides. Let's see, where is it? There it is. And share. There we go. Good. People should be able to see that. What this purpose here is, you see, speed up the transition of the oil and gas industry is sort of kind of a higher purpose, and delivering an exceptional service experience, that's kind of a standard business mission statement. So they wanted to upgrade this. They were not in crisis at the time. So we spent 2 days finding the higher purpose of about 90% of the employees, their individual purpose in life, which is a best practice. And then about 2 days finding a new purpose for the organization. And while we were doing that, we ran into a problem. So the true purpose process that I use, instead of trying to figure out the purpose, we access it through the unconscious. And the statements we were getting weren't that powerful. And the people who hired me were a little concerned, as I was. So we spent several hours working through it to create stronger statements, and eventually wound up with this. Now you'll notice that there's a lot more information here than in the prior version. And you may not even understand some of it. This was intended for internal use. I have their permission to use it. And you'll see, in particular, I want to draw your attention to the third sentence here, which is related to their old purpose. Energy Circle's mission is to transform the oil and gas industry. These statements here, if you were to read them out loud, you would discover that they generate a lot more emotion than the old one does. And this is the key takeaway I want you to get from this session, which is that a purpose statement, in order to be useful, must generate emotion, must generate emotion. A purpose statement that doesn't generate emotion is useless because it will not inspire a change in behavior. So that's why we were measuring for emotion while we were upgrading this purpose. So that all eventually went fine. Since then, they have changed their business model based on this purpose and are using it to avoid price erosion in their market under the whole COVID-19 mess. And they've also used the purpose to attract new employees. And when the new employees come on board, they insist that they find their own individual higher purpose in order to participate in the company, which I just think is great. I want to just circle back to wrap here to the very end, which is their mission to transform the oil and gas industry. Here in Berkeley, California, where I live, the oil and gas industry is evil and must be destroyed. Everyone's very clear about that. Most of them aren't ex-commanding officers from the Navy, but anyway, so these guys, to transform the oil and gas industry, is to treat it as a stakeholder and to seek to engage it in order to make it part of the solution rather than part of the problem, which is the way conscious capitalists think, as opposed to activists in Berkeley. And so now they're creating a strategy for how they're going to use their purpose and how they're going to use their position in the industry to transform that industry. So I'm very excited about the results they've gotten, and they're doing very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I think that that's a perfect note to end on, where we look at the purpose of conscious capitalism, right? To elevate humanity through business. And the grandness of that purpose can only be achieved if we all do our own work in getting a little bit better every day, continuing that long game of conscious capitalism so that we can all, week by week, month by month, year by year, create the gains for ourselves and for our companies that will help all of us to grow our numbers, grow our effectiveness, and help to elevate humanity through business. If you would like to connect with any of these consultants, they will all have their own profiles that are going live on the Conscious Capitalism website tomorrow. You can see them there. We will be around on Slack after this to talk about that just a bit. And I want to formally acknowledge the world's first 6 certified conscious capitalism consultants. There are 26 more people that are currently enrolled in the program that are working toward their certification behind them. Class 4 for this program opens for applications on May 1st. and that class will begin in the fall. And if you are interested in joining the ranks of these consultants and are just not going to wait until the fall, there are a couple more seats left for class 3, which kicks off on April 24th. Thank you all very much for your kind attention. Thank you to our amazing consultants for prepping this wonderful session. Back to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you and congratulations once again to the certified consultants. It is such an honor to be on this journey with you together. Want to remind folks that we do have a full program tomorrow, and we will be getting started at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can find the full schedule for the day at conference.consciouscapitalism.org. And if you look for that weekly schedule for April 13th to 16th, you can see hour by hour who you can hear from. And to tie it all together, as Nathan said, we're taking this one day at a time. So thank you so much to everybody who has been with us. Congratulations to our consultants. Thank you for partnering with me on this, Nathan, and we will see you all tomorrow. Good night.